it's turned into 3 parts. So I presented part 1, I guess you could call it, in December, and then I guess second part in January. So I guess this would be part 3. I don't want to spend a lot of time recapping, but the last time I spoke, it was just to the West Coast. So I'll just recap quickly, but I do want to finish today. I've still got a good amount to get through. Okay, so it's about the shakings. It's about the shaking at Sunday law, the upcoming very soon Sunday law, the Sunday law of Daniel 11:41. And I've been looking at the shaking that we're expecting. So I've got the line of the 144,000. You'll notice Sunday law, soon coming Sunday law, Daniel 12:1, second advent. And then the line of the priest, this of course would be 2014, Sunday law for the priest, 2019 shut door, 2021 second advent for the priests. And I put the agricultural model in there. And the first recap point, something we discussed last time, is that we can see the tares. Okay, so I've done the wheat and the tares intertwined together there, the wheat and the tares. Okay, there's a mature plant under the latter rain after Sunday. Then the second, shout out any questions. I always encourage questions or any thoughts or comments. Then the second point to recap is my terminology. I kind of made it up. It's a little bit like we're going to get a double shaking at the Sunday law. I think probably for the first time on our line. So you have a test at Sunday law, which is part of the repeating pattern. So you've got unsealing, increase of knowledge 2019, formalization 2021, and then test. And you're tested on the formalization. That formalization is basically trans-inclusive radical feminism. And we also mentioned democracy as well. Okay, so you're tested on trans-inclusive radical feminism. So that will be one model for a test. And then the second one is in Daniel 11:41 itself. It's in the biblical, sorry, messages. It's actually in the biblical text. Okay, it says, the king of the north shall enter into the glorious land, and many will be overthrown. And in the past, we haven't known who the many are because the text, the surface text doesn't tell us. But when you use parable methodology, you take what you do know to find out what you don't know. So we've said in the last presentation, we said that we know who Edom, Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon are. They are what we call the Nephilim. Okay, and they escape out of the king of the north's hand. So they were in the king of the north's hand, or in Babylon. We made it look like a prison because that's what the language, the Hebrew language, denotes. And at the loud cry, they're told to come out of Babylon, God's people. So they answer the loud cry and they come into the movement. And you can see this free person is in the movement. So if you take what you do know, you can find out what you don't know and who the many overthrown are. So if you're not overthrown before verse 41, Sunday law, then you're free. And we've shown that this free person is in the movement. And then if you're overthrown after Sunday law, then you go into Babylon. Okay. So the many overthrown are all the people in this movement. Okay. Unfortunately, it does say many. So you've got the test at Sunday law from the repeating pattern where you're tested on the previous formalization. Then you've got another test, and I always point to second selected messages 80.4, which seems to be talking about the same sort of thing as Daniel 11:41, many overthrow. Okay, so that's a recap of point number 2. And then point number 3, I think we're close enough to the Sunday law now where we can start to see how it's going to look. And in my opinion, the Sunday law, let me put it this way, the first Sunday law was 2014, And the last Sunday law is the upcoming Sunday law. And I'm wondering if we could do Alpha to Omega, parable methodology. And if you want to know what the last Sunday law looks like, just look at the first Sunday law and it will tell you. So I'm going to run through that now and we can see what you think. I might be wrong. Okay. Shout out questions while I go through my notes or any thoughts.
I have a question, Aaron.
Please.
So those people that come out from Edom, Moab, and Ammon, how will they come to this movement? How will we reach out to them to come to this movement?
Okay, that's the question, isn't it? So either it turns out to be just like the Levites, they failed as a group, and what happened with the Levites happens with the Nephilim. In other words, nothing. Okay, but I'm not a supporter of the logic which says the Levites failed as a group, therefore the Nephilim failed. But you can say just because one group fails, therefore another completely different group will definitely fail. I know there's similarities, like their messengers are the same messengers. But still, I think it's a possibility, 50-50, whatever, that there will be a group called the Nephilim. There's different models to look at. Okay, so here's one, which would seem to suggest we do have to give the loud cry. And loud cry and latter rain is exactly the same thing. So this is the latter rain, and this is a message in this dispensation. There's another model to show this message in this dispensation, and that's this, what we call a repeating pattern. And here is the loud cry. So the loud cry and the latter rain are 100% synonymous. They're the same thing. Most or all Adventists would agree with you there. Ellen White can back you up. So this is a picture of you, Gloria. This is a mature plant after the Sunday law. And what happens if you don't receive that latter rain? What happens if you don't drink rain as a plant, Gloria?
You die.
Yes, you wither and die. Okay, so if that latter rain is the same as the loud cry, what does that tell you about your relationship to the loud cry? Anyone?
You have to speak it. I mean, you have to give it.
You have to give it or you'll wither and die. So it's only one model. You can make that argument for the Levites, to be honest. I could just draw this one, Midnight Cry, and sort of do the same sort of thing. So I'm not saying it's definitely going to turn out that way. But basically, in Elder Parminder's words, are we going to get famous suddenly, because at the moment we're completely unknown, and be able to give the loud cry to the world? Does that answer your? I've forgotten your question. Does that answer your question?
So do you think that latter rain will be like accumulation of all the knowledge that we have throughout this movement in the last 30 years? Is that what we'll be assured of? Is that what we're sharing? Because there won't be new light, right?
We are in the latter rain, no? I mean, we're already, isn't it like after the Sunday law, we have to give the loud cry, right? No, I mean.
So that's basically how I would answer it, Lana. We're not actually in the latter rain yet on this model. Okay, the latter rain starts at Sunday law, which is soon, but it's still in the future. Okay. Gloria, tell me your question again. I'm terribly sorry.
Oh, no. So that latter rain will be just the confidence of the messages that we have been receiving? Because there's no new messages, right?
Basically, I think so. But I say basically because I think there will be some new messages. Okay, so I know I sound like I'm contradicting. This is what I mean to explain it. This latter rain is given to the 144,000. So you and I hopefully drink up this message and then we give it to the Nephilim. So God is saying, hey, 144,000, I've got a message for the Nephilim. Can you give them a message, please? We say, yeah, sure. And we say, come out of Babylon, God's people, because it's sexist and dictatorship, authoritarian. Okay. So in that sense, I would agree with you that it's just what we already know. Okay. We're just telling them what we know so they can come out of Babylon next. I'll use a colloquialism that Elder Parminder used to use. He used to say, by Sunday law, it's all done and dusted. This just matures the plants, but you have to have learnt it all back here, basically, loosely. Okay, so in that sense. But having said that, we know one thing's for sure, we still have to get a message on time. That would be for us and whoever else is going to listen, Nethanim, if there are any. Okay, so this is time, and we should get, I'll say the day and the hour of Daniel 12:1, and then during the harvest, during that formalization, we should get the day and the hour of the second advent. So I think there's going to be some more messages in that sense. Does that make sense?
Hey, Aaron?
Yes.
I just wanted to throw in an idea here. When Elder Parmenter was given the same question several years back, when we were approaching 2014, when we were approaching 2019, and each time that there's a new message that's unsealed, then people were asking, well, what about all the people who just come into the movement and then they don't know all the stuff from the past? And he used the analogy of a hurdle, and he says, if you can jump that hurdle, then given the time, they can digest and understand everything else that came beforehand. I do remember him saying that.
Yeah,
so
there'll be something.
If there is a new message, which there will be, the Nethinims will be able to digest it because the Holy Spirit's already prepared them to be able to digest it. And if there's a whole lot of details of things that we have learned along the way, they'll be able to pick it up later on.
Yes, sounds like quite a realistic model to me. Okay, did I answer, Gloria? Or anyone else with anything?
No, that was you answer sort of. It looks like with Elena's presentation and with Lana, she brought up about Esther. Looks like we're trying to master the methodology and trying to just be confident in the methodology. Seems like that's what we're trying to be settled with at this time.
Okay, I was just asked to do something in the meeting. So yes, and I'm going to get into that because that was the shaking of 2014. It was all to do with methodology. And that's why when you get into 2015, and FFA are doing their methodology, by the time you get to 2016, I think Elder Parminder first presented on parable methodology in 2016. I'm sure, knowing Parminder as we all do, it was because of this, what you just said, this bad methodology that was being used in the first summit, 2014. So I will get into that as well, thanks. Okay, so still on the recap, we mentioned the attack on leadership. And I'm not going to recap all the different points, but one point we did bring up was this sort of movement, this push, suggestion to vote for leaders and leadership. So I'm not going to go back over what we said, but I'm going to pick up from there now for today. Okay, so voting. When was the first election for humanity? What was the first election, according to Elder Tess, for humanity?
At the tree, is it at the tree?
Exactly. So they were told, choose your leader. Choose this day whom you will serve. One tree was God, the other tree was Satan. They chose Satan as the leader of this world. What was the first ever sin? First ever sin in heaven?
Was it pride?
It was pride, second sin in that case, because you're right. Pride led to an attack on leadership. So the attack on leadership was the attack on Jesus. As soon as Lucifer found out that Jesus was God, basically, and not just the covering cherub, Lucifer launched an attack on Jesus. Okay, and that was because of his leadership status. So I'm starting to realize most of this study relies on alpha to omega parable methodology. So if the first sin was an attack on leadership, the first election went wrong, how's the last election going to go in the glorious land? How's the last election going to go? Is it going to go okay? Good or bad?
Very bad.
Very bad. Okay, so the first election went badly and the second election went badly. The first sin was an attack on leadership. So I'm wondering if the last sin is also an attack on leadership through elections, through voting. So let's all vote Parminder out, shall we? That's basically what we say. We all love Parminder, of course. No one would say that they hate Parminder, but we don't like his decisions. He's our friend. We don't like some of the decisions he's made.
Sí. No, ahí me está pagando.
So let me mute someone. Don't forget to mute your. So let's look at
You mean-
Elder Parminder.
You don't like his pragmatic decisions? Is that what it is?
Anything. You don't like who
Devil's
he's
advocate.
chosen for leadership. You don't like who he's chosen for Bible work. You don't like something he did at a camp meeting. It can be anything, business meeting, whatever. Okay. So we're going to look at Parminder. He's not here today, so I don't mind embarrassing him and saying Parminder is actually exceptional. Okay. Parminder's exceptional. Let's thread, we thread our stories, and that's good methodology. Okay, it's very important at this time to remember you can't just go to July 2020, July 18, 2020, and put nuclear bomb there when it's never appeared anywhere here and it doesn't appear anywhere here. Okay, you can't just drop a pin in there. So let's thread Elder Parminder. Someone shout, I want to really finish today. I think I'm just going to do it, okay, rather than ask you. So the first place you can thread Elder Parminder is 1989. Let me ask, what happened to Elder Parminder in 1989 that I can put in there?
Baptized into the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Good. And so there is a study that shows 2 leaders appear at 1989, and there's like half a dozen witnesses to that. So you not only get Jeff 1a, you also get Parminder, just like you get the birth of John the Baptist, but you also get the birth of Jesus at 4 BC. So you can put P for Parminder here. Okay, we've got 2a, and Parminder's the second messenger. So we also know you can put Parminder here if we're threading his story. Obviously, this is now Parminder's dispensation. So you can put Parminder at 2009 when he develops the 2520 into something like 25 hours of video. And then what have I got an extra? And then 2012, you've got Parminder's prediction of 2014 Sunday. Then when it came true, you have a change of leadership, okay, in 2014. And what should have happened is Elder Jeff should have decreased after, I'll say, 27 AD. Should have decreased as Parminder increased. And let me just mention in 2012 is when Elder Jeff blocked Elder Parminder's prediction. So I'm going to say for sure Elder Jeff should have decreased long before, or at least before 2012. So 2014, you can put Parminder there because he becomes the leader, change of leadership. Okay. And then because it's the same study, I'm going to do it in the same color. This is Parminder. We discussed these last time, so I put them in already. This is Parminder here. So at Sunday law, you get the second angel's message empowered. Okay, Great Controversy, chapter 38. The second angel's message is empowered at Sunday law. That's Revelation 18, 1 to 3. and then verse 4 onwards is the loud cry. And 2E goes all the way to the end. Okay. So, is there any, I said he's exceptional because there is no other messenger out of Elder Jeff and Elder Tess that starts at the very beginning of the big line. It's the biggest line you can have. Kinda. I know there's a line of great controversy, but for us, for the last generation, Parminder goes from 1989 and you can thread his story all the way through right to the end. Okay. And you can't do that with Jeff or Elder Tess. Elder Tess started her ministry in 2016. Any thoughts? That makes him exceptional.
But Elder Tess was born in 1989.
Elder Tess was born in 1990. But her ministry didn't start then. And 1990 is not a way mark.
I thought she was born in 1989.
No, 1990.
1990.
I was misinformed.
Okay.
So Aaron, when you say second message in power, what do you mean? Are you talking about the messenger? Are you talking about the messages? What do you mean at the Sunday law there? Messages?
Just Revelation 18, 1-3. I saw a mighty angel come down from heaven, great power, cried with a loud voice. That's all empowerment language, especially if you compare it to Revelation 10, which is 1E, which is also an empowerment. And then you can tell that's the second angel's message in Revelation 18, because it's exactly the same language as Revelation 14, verse 8, which is the second angel's message. Babylon is fallen, become the habitation of devils, the kings of the earth are drunk. All of Babylon is fallen, basically. So that's the second angel's message.
Wasn't the empowerment of the second angel at the midnight cry in the Millerite history? But and we understand that 3 is at the Sunday law.
3 is also at the Sunday law. It's not Parminder, so I'll go back to a different color, 3E. Okay, so the midnight cry is the empowerment of the second angel. Midnight cry and loud cry are synonymous, except who's the audience? So the midnight cry says, come out of Laodicea, my people, because they're sexist and homophobic. And then the loud cry says, come out of Babylon, my people, because they're sexist and homophobic. Okay, so the Midnight Cry 2021, I think it's because there's different models in it. It might be just different, you're dealing with different groups. Because this is the line of the 144,000. But when you're just talking about the empowerment of the second angel in Millerite time, it would probably be on for the first group or something like that. I'll say I don't know, I'm not very clear. Somebody else might have a better understanding of that. But you are right that the Midnight Cry is the empowerment of the second angel. But if you just read GC 38, she quotes Revelation 18, and you only need to read Revelation 18 to see it as well. And then it comes at Sunday law. It's in early writings as well, I forget the page number. I didn't answer your question, by the way, if you're confused. The answer is I don't know.
No, it's fine. Yeah, it's fine. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. So we've got Parminder threaded. So who thinks it's a good idea to vote out Parminder? Okay. I'll say God's chosen, however you want to word it. Melodramatic language, if you like. The Lord's anointed, something like that. But you hear people say, well, now we're a radical feminist movement. So should we really have Parminder, a man, as our leader? Okay, so did God know Parminder was a man in 1989? Did God know Parminder was a man in 2001? Okay, so God knows the end from the beginning. And God still chose Parminder. Any thoughts?
I think equality doesn't necessarily mean, I mean, radical feminism doesn't necessarily mean we now have to have women, you know, all at all, you know, at all levels. And this is what I mean is that it's not about gender, it's about fitness to do the job. Besides, you know, representing equality, the symbol, but there's also, you know, the- whether you're fit, whether you're intellectually fit and spiritually fit to do the job.
And Parminder is a radical feminist. So even though he's a man, he can be a man and a radical feminist. Okay, so then we went on to, we made a point about the attack on leadership. This is all this talk about voting for our leaders on all levels, I think. So then we brought in Numbers 16:3. And I did that because that's what Elder Jeff did here when there was an attack on his leadership, okay, at 2014. Right? That was all part of the just. We did all that last time. So Numbers 16:13, let's actually read it and think about it as you look at this line and this model. Numbers 16:3, and they gathered themselves together against Moses and against Aaron, and said unto them, Ye take too much upon you, seeing all the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Wherefore then lift ye up yourselves above the Wherefore then, in other words, why are you lifting yourselves up above the congregation of the Lord? So as you look on this model, is that true? Is everyone in this field holy? Every one of them? Anyone?
No,
No. Who are you seeing that's not holy in this model?
the tares.
Good. So you've got the wheat and the tares, which are with us until harvest, which is a little whiles off still. I don't know how long. We don't know how long. So if you're going to say vote because we're all holy, first of all, that's just prophetically wrong. There's just no doubt about that. I don't think I need to elaborate. It's just incorrect. So what you're saying is let's let the tares. Sorry. Let's let the tares have a vote. Okay, so you're going to let tares vote. There's about 1,000 people in the movement, approximately. This next bit is just an example. You can disagree if you like, but I'm going to say the majority are tares in the movement. Okay, I'm just going to use very loosely models like many are overthrown. Makes it sound like the majority, even if it's a small majority. Straight is the gate, narrow is the way, few there be that find it. Noah's Ark. Can't exactly get less people on board than Noah's family, as it was in the days of Noah. So I'm just loosely going to use logic like that. You can disagree, just to say that if there's 1,000 people in the movement, let's say you've got 501 tares versus 499 wheat. I'll be as kind as possible as I can to that model. Okay, so the tares are going to outvote the wheat when it comes to voting on leadership. This person that God has chosen since 1989, we think it's a good idea to vote him out, do we? And who are tares going to vote for? Tares going to vote for wheat, or tares going to vote for tares? And you're just going to write, we're here, the great test by which your eternal destiny is decided. You're happy. No, you're not. I'm just saying some people are happy to vote out this leader who has this track record. And you're just going to say, I'll say yes or no, sir, to some new leader who you may never have even known. It's probably a tare, because a tare will vote for a tare. They might outnumber the wheat. So voting, bad idea. I'm going to say attack on leadership, just like 2014. Any thoughts?
logical.
Okay. The second thing that happened in 2014 was the Towers of Zephaniah. Okay. Part of the Just said they were literal towers. Okay. Zephaniah.
Amy and Bob had a comment
Go ahead.
on the chat.
Do you want
On
to
the
read it out?
chat,
Sure.
it said it would be like Israelites voting out God and wanting Saul.
Voting out God and wanting Saul, King Saul.
Saul. Not King Saul.
Yes, that's true as well. There's seems true anyway. Without thinking about it, it seems like God chose a leader, and they said, "No, we want to choose our own leader," and they all chose their human wisdom. They chose an atheist bull. So there's another example of how a kind of an election went badly. Okay, I think that's a good point. Without thinking that through. Okay, so the second one we've got is literal to spiritual. Parable methodology was not used. Okay, so they said that these literal towers in Zephaniah are the twin towers. And Jeff said you can't do that. You can't do literal to literal. And I think Jeff said it's actually the church which falls at 9/11, not the twin towers that fell at 9/11. Whether that's actually right or wrong, because I don't think that's actually correct now that we have more light on that. But the point is, they were doing literal methodology instead of spiritual. So we're close enough to the Sunday law now. Is the movement started to look at anything literal that we've always looked at the spiritual model or prophetic actor? We started to look at literal something when we've always looked at spiritual something. Maybe not. Anyone? Three, two, one.
Do you
I
mean
guess
to
not.
9/11 event, to 9/11?
No, I just mean today we're here. Are we looking at a literal prophetic actor? It's a better word, but anyway, are we looking at a literal thing when we've always and should be looking at the spiritual thing? Maybe not. Okay, we'll move on.
For some reason,
anyone
Aaron,
can think-
I'm having a hard time following what you're asking for. I'm sorry.
No problem. So let's look at it this way. I don't know which way. Literal or spiritual? Someone name a literal thing that we turn glorious land. Okay, so we're meant to be experts on Daniel 11:41. We look at the glorious land, and we've always looked at that spiritually. We say we're not looking at the literal glorious land. We're looking at America. It's a symbol. We're not looking at the literal Edom, Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon. I think whoever they are today. It means Nephilim. And we go through that whole thing. The king of the north, we don't do what Uriah Smith did and say it's Turkey. We say the king of the north is papacy in alliance with America. Now it's just America. So that's what I mean. So we started to look at a literal entity, is the word I was looking for. We've always looked at the spiritual. In other words, if we all suddenly started to try and trace who Edom, Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon are literally today. We say, oh, look, they're Jordanians, or they migrated to Syria, or something like that. We start investigating the story of these tribes. That's what I mean. So I'll leave it with you. We'll leave
I
that
haven't
one.
thought, Aaron. What about election?
Election.
Literal. Yeah, literally.
No. I think it's okay to
Just
look at a
about-
literal
wow.
election.
Say that again?
I think we do look at literal elections because unlike nuclear bombs, we can place that in our message, and Elder Tess can back that up with the Diadochi Wars. 2016 election was in the Diadochi Wars, and 2020, January the 6th, 2021.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's okay to look at literal elections because we do
So-
look at the executive branch.
Yeah, exactly. Say that we know it's going to be a conservative. Would you say that?
We know
In
it's
the
going to be a
election?
conservative at
Yeah.
Sunday, Republican.
And we know the person.
We know the candidate today is Trump.
Yeah.
If it wasn't recorded, I'd just be going, yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah, I know.
but I'm thinking, I think the same as you. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'll agree with you.
Okay.
I'll just be open about that.
All right. Good. Thank you.
Okay. I'll read my notes while you all have a think. If we're looking at any literal entity, and we've never done that before, we've always looked at the spiritual entity.
Would it
How
have
about
anything to do
a
with Islam?
literal attack by Islam? Yeah,
Literal attack by
literal
Islam.
attack by Islam.
Okay, who did they attack?
You mean the Hamas attack there? The
October
Israelites
7th?
there? Yeah.
Okay.
Are
so
we
let's
going to
put that
see
in.
another, jihadist movement attack?
So literal Israel. Let me just quickly ask. I need to read this. So October the 7th, Hamas, undoubtedly militant Islam, hit literal Israel. Okay, the movement has shifted a bit to concentrate on this. If you ask those presenters, and you say, well, we've never put literal Israel anywhere, literal Israel shows up here, just like a nuclear bomb shows up here. Okay, you need to thread your story. So who knows, maybe you can go back and do that work. But the only time we ever talked about literal Israel is when Elder Tess talked about the king of the north and the king of the south and their own proxies. And Israel was just one of them. We also talked about Kuwait, for example, Iran, Iraq, and things like that. Saudi, obviously. So we've never looked at literal Israel before, so we're just going to drop that pin midway here. The movement has started to concentrate on it. And I think if you ask the presenters why they're doing that, they'd say, well, it's not to do with literal Israel, it's because it's militant Islam. It's probably the license they would use to talk about October the 7th and since then. Would that be correct methodology? So if you're going to take militant Islam, I think you're talking about the third woe. So the prophetic role of Islam is to first hurt and then kill the army of Rome, which is the spiritual glorious land, symbolic glorious land, America, not the literal glorious land. So I don't think you could use the third woe, radical Islam, as your license to talk about Hamas attacking literal Israel, because it doesn't fit the prophetic model. If Hamas attacked America, you could probably glean some significance because Islam attacks the army of Rome then, even though it's not Daniel 12:1 yet, but at least it's the right entity, at least it's America, the army of Rome. What if on October the 7th, Hamas or ISIS or whatever attacked Mumbai in India? Would we all be concentrating on that now? who will be talking about it.
Aaron, I have an opinion. I agree with what you're saying. But what if someone says, okay, do you view the attack on Israel by Hamas also as an attack on the West?
Like Mumbai, because Israel, we've learned, is an American proxy or ally, so is India.
Okay.
So would we all be talking about this attack on Mumbai? Because militant Islam have attacked other targets throughout
Including
here
Europe. Yes.
that we don't ever talk about. France, the London bombings,
Right.
The Bali bombings, 200 dead, 200 injured. We don't talk about that. We say that's not prophecy because it's not the army of Rome.
Making sense. Yeah.
In fact, if you really want to, you can go, I think, before this, to be honest, but it's still on our line. This is 10-year part of the extension to our line here. The Beirut barracks bombing, Palestinian PFLP, I think they attacked the Marines base in Beirut and killed the most number of American Marines ever, at least at that point, the terrorist attack. So it's even the army of Rome. We never talk about that. Hijackings of the planes in New York, that actually happened on September the 11th by a Palestinian group of whatever year it was. So I don't know why we've turned to literal Israel. Off the top of my head, standing here now, I can't justify it. In other words, I can't say that's good methodology. And we're here. In case that's worrying anyone.
Aaron?
Yes.
Yeah, you're making sense. Sorry, Bob. Go ahead. Go ahead, Bob.
I struggle myself when I think of literal Israel. I think of the nation of Israel that God raised up, you know, with Jacob's family, you know, and that God coddled for 1,500 years, and the 490 prophetically, you know, brought us to 34 A.D. when God divorced himself from the nation of Israel. And then we know that the nation was destroyed, or that Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 A.D. And so, as an institution, as Parmenter would say, they were no longer fit for purpose. And so, all this stuff about literal Israel, to me, it all revolves around the fact that there is a large swath of Christendom that still wants to look at the Bible literally and look at the promises given to literal Israel, and want to still see that they're going to be fulfilled that way. And so, to me, I don't want to say too much right now, but I just don't understand how everybody wants to do this dance, you know, with what they've created in the Middle East here in 1924.
So, perfect point for me to lead into my next point. Second to last presentation that Elder Parmenter did in Australia, it was in Australia, about 3/4 of the way through. He's got the 10 risks, and he's got what the Eurasia Group, is it, lists. And then he says, do we believe that? Do we believe that? And you've got this long line of ticks. And we see things surprisingly similarly to the Eurasia Group. When he gets to the Middle East, he says something like, why are we interested in, you know, that? He says Israel. And I think he says, because Americans are interested in Israel, apostate Protestants. Because literal Israel is an apostate Protestant prophetic actor. That's their methodology. They do literal. We saw that when it came to taking over America. They said, well, Joshua just did genocide and slavery, so will we, literal to literal. And they still do that today. That's why Trump, I think, what did he do? Move the embassy to Jerusalem, isn't it something like that, to appease apostate Protestants? Because they say the Jews are God's people. Those that bless Abraham, God will bless. Those that curse Abraham, God will curse. And so that's why the Eurasia group are looking at that. Because of apostate Protestantism. I don't know. I just want to point this out again. We're here. Okay, in case anyone wants to get worried. And their perspective is, apostate Protestant, is that the Jews are God's people. So that makes all Jews all good, which of course makes all Palestinians all bad. Okay, so apostate Protestant methodology. And whenever you get apostate Protestant methodology, far right, you always get the conspiracy theories. Okay. Any thoughts? Oh, I do want to say one thought. Okay, it sounds like I'm contradicting myself. I've heard one thought on October 7th, Hamas, that I think rings true, but I'm no expert. I could well be wrong. But it's actually something that Lily said. She said, don't you think they could represent the Nabateans in the Third Diadochi War? Okay, Lily will explain this better than me. If you have any questions, ask her. But it's something like the king of the north is on the way to fight the king of the south in the Babylonian War. They get distracted by the Nabateans, and the Nabateans can be traced back to Ishmael or something like that. And so Lily said, it's a little bit like the king of the north was fighting the king of the south over Ukraine and funding Ukraine, sorry. Then suddenly October 7th happens and all the funding and attention goes to the Nabateans. Even when you do that, you're not, I don't think there's a literal Israel, that story, at least that Elder Test puts out. You've got the Nabateans that would be Hamas. You don't have literal Israel that would be someone else. That's the extent of my knowledge. I'm sure there's something wrong in there. Okay. Any thoughts?
I have a thought.
Go ahead.
I'm thinking of Israel, literal Israel, and the support of the United States with literal Israel. They're supporting Netanyahu, but now there's been an uprising, especially with one of the lead senators, Schumer. And he is saying this is unjust. And his comments now, the news is picking up on, and they're covering this. He's a Democrat. And I wonder, I mean, I don't want to project anything. I'm just saying what's happening right now, presently, because of the Palestinians, that this could be a loss of support from America to Israel.
Okay, thanks. I'm not sure how it'll play out from here on out. So,
yeah, it's just a heads up. It's no projection of what, but it could be that the support won't be there for Israel. And what difference that would make.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, any other thoughts before we move on? I'm assuming there's nothing else because it took us a long time to even think of that one. So there's probably nothing else in the movement that we're looking at that's literal. Whereas we've always looked at spiritual Israel, that would be ourselves. Okay, the third thing that contributed to the shaking in the first Sunday law was the locusts of Joel 2. Okay, what do locusts represent in Bible prophecy? Where do I put this?
One perspective is Islam, radical.
Good. So you can say Islam. Was there another perspective?
Rome.
For the locust, yeah, yes, right. Thank you.
Let's make that a proper S. Or it could be Rome. So, in the words of William Miller, symbols can have more than one signification. Symbols can have more than one meaning, he used to say. And Path of the Just said the locusts represent Islam using a false methodology, There is Islam in Revelation 9, so there is Islam in Joel 2. Elder Jeff says, no, you can't do that. To do proper literal to spiritual, you need to find out who the literal is. And Joel is not talking about Islam. Joel's talking about the king of the north. So if it's the literal king of the north in Joel, then if you're going to bring that, you know, Jeff used to say the effect of every vision. If you're going to bring that into our time or 9/11 or anything like that, then you're going to have to say the spiritual is spiritual Rome, can't be Islam. I hope I explained that well. I'm stuttering a bit. Any thoughts on that or questions?
If I follow if I followed what you just try to explain, okay, I'm looking at what came to my mind is the counterfeit. So we should be looking at I'm just going to say this. So we should be looking at the counterfeit being only Rome and not radical Islam. Okay, I follow you. Right, I follow your thought.
But in general, we should be looking at radical Islam because they appear back here in the future, Daniel 12.
But not as a counterfeit, am I right?
Just as they kill the army of Rome, not under not under the teaching of the third one, anyway.
Okay.
Okay. If I said horses, what do horses represent in Bible prophecy?
Are you looking for military? I'm not sure.
Good. No, sorry, isn't that horse chariots and horses and many ships? So military. In Daniel 11:40, that I think you're probably referring to which country, which entities horses are being talked about?
United States.
Rome, America, yeah.
Good. King of the North, Rome, America. This would be horses now. It's under locusts, but I don't know how to do this. Maybe here. And who are the horses in Revelation 9?
Islam.
Good. Horses prepared unto battle, etc. So you can see symbols can have more than two significations. Miller's rule number 10, figures sometimes have two or more different significations. So the problem in 2014 is Path of the Just got Islam mixed up with Rome or the papacy. Revelation 16, who's the kings of the east that dry up the river Euphrates during the plagues? I'll read it for you. Revelation 16:12. The sixth angel poured out its vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. So during the plagues, it's referring back to a story, Daniel 5, Belshazzar's feast, Cyrus and Darius come. That would be the literal. Okay. So I'll put King of East. Because here I'll put K-O-N, I'll put K-O-E. The kings of the East in Revelation 16. So Cyrus and Darius are coming to punish Babylon. And whose prophetic role is it to punish Babylon or the king of the north or America?
Islam.
That's Media Persia, Cyrus and Darius. And subsequently, symbols can have more than one signification. What does Media Persia become? Switches to a different prophetic actor. symbol? One guess.
United
King of the
States.
North.
Good. Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, Rome, King of the North. So my point is, you can quite easily get Islam mixed up with the papacy because they share the same symbols. Okay, and that all comes from looking at the first Sunday law and the shaking which ensued. I'm going to make this point several times. Okay, I don't know about you. I'm particularly slow, so I need to hear things over and over again for it to sink in. When I said many are overthrown, the losses here in that shaking was 90%. We lost 90% of the movement. Back in those days, from some, I don't know, whenever it was, 2009, 2010, I was still doing the websites, the YouTubes, and all of that back then. So, you know what we were all like for numbers back in those days. So I'm looking at all the counts, the views. They were all consistently around about 3,000. And then after the shaking of 2014, they went down to about 300. Mark Bruce did stick around. He traveled and spoke and had a better bird's eye view than me. Parminder didn't start traveling till 2015. So Mark Bruce came to my house one day and I said, how many people did we lose in the shaking? He said about 3,000. So that also matched. So we went from 3,000 to 300. I'm going to call that 90%. Okay.
Prophetic.
I hope not. I don't want to lose. If we lose 90% in this movement in the next Sunday law, which is very soon, we go down to what, 100 people, 200 or something.
I do pray and hope that that many in that verse is precondition.
Yeah.
It sounds like Gideon.
Okay. It does, doesn't it? Yeah. I've
Yes.
always thought.
And I was thinking
300. Go ahead.
Yes, I was thinking about Paul on the because I just did that presentation, and I've been thinking that Paul, and it's on the Acts 27 Revisited, where Elder Tess brings, it's a compilation of the 144,000 line, and all three fractals are in there, and so Paul, meaning small, he's a symbol to me of the 144,000 and on that line. And it seems to me there will be a shaking because it's going to be a very small group. I wish it weren't so, but it just looks that way.
Agree. Okay, then the most, I'll say, infamous methodology that FFA used is coincidences. Jeff literally said there's no coincidences in God's word. And these coincidences, as I was writing my notes, they seem to fall into two categories, words and numbers. And obviously numbers was the big one. So I was racking my brains trying to think of an example. After 2016, when we discovered Raphia and Panium, it was in 2017 that Jeff used coincidences in words. And he said, because Panium starts with pan, that means you can just throw any word that starts with pan or has got pan in it and put it at Panium. Okay, and they started to do that. Pandemonium, pandemic, stuff like that. And then, of course, when you get the pandemic in 2020, they go, we were right, but they won't because it wasn't Panium. Okay, so you can't just take coincidences in words and say that that's methodology. Okay, that's the only one I could think of. I try not to study error, so I don't have a great memory for all of that back then. So I had to just make one up, and inevitably, when I make up an example, it's always a bit rubbish. But I was thinking, what if you read an article, say a year ago or something, and it says, Trump's classified documents discovered at Mar-a-Lago have now been unsealed. You read something in the news with a word which you recognize from your message. Are you just going to look at the date of that news article and go, we're in the unsealing, wherever that would be? You can't just take words that you're familiar with and just make a doctrine or a waymark or a prophetic event out of it. Bad methodology. Okay, any thoughts on that? And the other coincidences was numbers. Okay, Elder Tess has already told us, I actually looked it up. In her presentation, December 19, 2020, it wasn't the only time she spoke. She didn't say it, I'm going to present it in my words. Okay, this is the latter rain. She was talking about this fractal actually. And she was saying from 2014, we need to be adults. We need to be mature plants, okay, because that's what you are on this line from 2014. And then she says, when I was a child, because you're born here, when I was a child, I spake as a child. Okay, but now I have to put away childish things and use mature prophetic methodology. Okay, and numbers is probably turned into the worst type of fanaticism, I say loosely, that this movement has seen. Okay, and that's because basically it all ended with Theodore, but it started long before. Elder Tess has already put into the record the Ramsey theory about coincidences. From memory, I think she said, if not, this is what I'm thinking, that here, it's all right to speak as a child. Okay, God's leading us, a very immature plan. So maybe he's going to do some things, maybe God, I'm sorry, is going to do some things genuinely back here that God's not going to do over here. Because God's speaking to God's child. Okay, so maybe God did send us something that we would think is a bit silly now, some coincidence with numbers. But just because God did it here, it doesn't mean God can do it, I don't know, 10 years later or something like that. Okay, because now God is speaking to God's adult children, mature plants. Okay, if God started to tell us about trans-inclusive radical feminism here, which is the message here, sorry, if God told us all about that, what does the latter rain do to the tender herb? Destroys it. So God has to speak to you in simplistic ways, which might include some numerical coincidences, but we shouldn't be doing that now. Bad methodology. Any thoughts? I'll check my notes. Doing good for time. Okay, just shout out if you have any thoughts, but I want to keep moving. Okay, so I'll give you a real life example.
I have a question. So, you know, there's been a lot of studies by Elena about Islam. How do you view that right now? We are right before the Sunday law, so we're, yeah. How do you view the studies of Elena about Islam?
I think there's 5 parts to it, so there'd be a lot of different comments to make. I couldn't really just do it in answering one question, like in 2 minutes or something. And plus, I'm probably not qualified to answer it, to be honest. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so this is another one, just like when Elder Jeff started saying, you could just use any word with pan in it, just place it at Panium. Elder Jeff in 2019, I think it was that March FFA camp meeting, when he handed his mantle to Elder Parminder. Correct me if I'm wrong, this is just from memory. He said, you know that God is leading you. He was on a trip and he was in an airport and he got his boarding pass and he said, in those days, brothers and sisters, you know when God is leading you, because something like his flight was 1:26 a.m. His gate was gate 46. The flight was United 911. And the cost of the ticket was $25, $20, something like that. And he held up the ticket. He said, "Can you focus on that, the camera?" And I remember it because he had a bit of a shake and I was trying to focus on it. I couldn't really. So that's pretty secure in my memory. I think I got that right. That was FFA's methodology, numerical coincidences. Okay. You know, FFA's numerical coincidences is the same as Laodicea's. Help me out here. I was trying to remember. Does anyone remember when the Adventist Church, Laodicea, said, "We need to pray for the latter rain"? It's a worldwide movement. So we're going to do it on the 7th of the 7th, 7th of July, 2007 at 7 o'clock p.m., something like that. He said, this is a chance to get God to pour out the latter rain. Okay, that's from memory. So they do the same kind of coincidences, numerical methodology. There's no way we should be doing that here as mature plants. Okay. If I haven't made a strong enough case, how do I know that for sure? So how come, what if you turn around and say to me, "Aaron, you can't speak for me. I know how God has led me. God has led me in those with coincidences." How can I say rudely, "I don't care. I know God hasn't led you that way. That's not God leading you"? How can I be so arrogant to tell you how God leads you personally? An idea came into my mind and I looked at the time and it was 9:11 a.m. God, all of that. So what if I said to you, I was lying in bed last night, I couldn't sleep, and my dead grandmother floated above me as a ghost and said, whatever, said the movement you're in is the correct one, and trans-inclusive radical feminism is the test. Even if it was something that we do believe, or something we don't believe. Sabbath is Sunday. So if I say that to you, so I know God is leading me, God sent my dead grandmother, you're just going to immediately say, I can tell you that God's not leading you, even in your personal walk, which should be none of my business. And I don't need to explain. State of the dead, it's against the law and the testament. Okay. So Ellen White says, you have nothing to fear for the future, lest we forget the way God has led us in the past. So how did God lead FFA in the past, which 100% led them to fall away? I say 100%, I'll qualify that. So I'll just talk about Jeff or FFA, I'll use them interchangeably. So Elder Jeff rejected time in 2012, ignored it through 2014, until Elder Tess made it impossible to ignore in 2018. Oh, by the way, Midnight Cry. See what I was saying before? They're synonymous. Midnight Cry, Loud Cry. Okay. Now Jeff basically has to accept time setting. It doesn't mean he loved it all along. I said something a bit wrong. Okay, I have to backtrack. Jeff actually accepted time setting in December 2016 in Holland in a private meeting. Then he first started to teach it in 2017. Yeah, the first time I think was in France in the summer of 2017, which means by the time Elder Tess comes along, he doesn't have a problem with time setting. November the 9th, 2019, and all of that. But the way he presents time setting is now God has given us time setting. In other words, he was still right back here to block this message. This was, I think he used to say half right, half wrong and stuff like that. He used to try and get out of it. Okay, but now God has sent us time setting. So he never fully accepted it. Where was I going with that? Okay, so you can say he fell away because of two streams, and that's of course true. When I said 100%, I'll say 99 then. But what he actually fell away with was after you get past 2019, when FFA fell away, now they've got a counterfeit message to cling on to. Before that, they didn't. They've got Theodore, Simon of Cyrene, wasn't it? So Theodore's doing his magic, his calendar work, his numerology, his numerical coincidences, and he comes up with a nuclear bomb in 2020. And because Jeff had a counterfeit message to cling to, he felt no problem, I'm guessing, falling away in 2019 because he had somewhere to go. Elder Parminder has always said, if you leave the movement, where are you going to go? So for a few short months, FFA had somewhere to go. They had Simon or Theodore to go to with his counterfeit message. So I'm going to say it was all of that numerical coincidences that caused Jeff to fall away and actually leave. I know he fell away before that. You can trace it back to here, 2012, 2 streams, 2018. But he actually physically left over Theodore because he believed Theodore's numerical coincidences. So that's how I can say, I know that's not how God leads, the way you know God doesn't use ghosts to lead anyone, individually or corporately. Okay. Any questions or thoughts? My point being, because that's how God led us in the past. And if you forget that, you've got something to fear. Speak up. Okay, then I'll conclude. Someone's already noticed, someone a few days ago said, oh, look, First Sunday Law 2014. Oh, just realized I can't do this. Okay, ignore that. Okay, I'm just going to conclude from my notes. I'm not going to do that right now. Okay, I'm just going to end on this. I'll remind you again. It was many overthrown in the first Sunday Law, 90%, close to 3,000 people, 2,700, whatever. Okay. So I'm the Bible worker, so I'm just going to use me. I can teach you the true message all day, every day. I can teach you the part is not the whole, the nature of humanity, 7 steps to glorification, radical feminism, cultural feminism. I can teach you the truth all day, every day. You can accept and believe all of it. I think you all have. Okay. I can't get you to shed your FFA methodology. Only you can do that. You can stop doing what we just said. Okay, I think it speaks loud enough because many are going to be overthrown. And none of us here disbelieve Elder Tessel Parminder, so we're probably not going to be overthrown because we suddenly become homophobic at Sunday. It's probably because we get a message and we cling to FFA methodology. Okay, we'll close there, but thoughts or questions are fine.
Very powerful. Thank you, Aaron.
Okay, I'll close in prayer. Almighty God in heaven, have mercy on us as we approach the Sunday Law. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Amen.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Aaron.